So welcome back. It's still February, and as we're still trying to do a theme month here, we're still dealing with Valentine's Day. It's just a couple days away, and as you know, it's everyone's favorite holiday, unless they're alone. And welcome back to the heart of the stories we tell. I'm Rob the host, and this is another look deep into what makes a story, a theory on storytelling by a storyteller who believes that every story has merit. And tonight's episode is Why We Tell Love Stories Part 2. Last week we talked about the side story, when stories, and a lot of them do it, have a subplot that's romance. And when you think about it, not even so much subplots. The Deadpool movie could have been a romance movie in and of itself with a slightly different tilt. Terminator is another great example. Stories that were primarily about the relationship even if we didn't know about it. And a lot of people give romance stories a lot of crap. I'll even raise my hand to saying I'm one of them. But you know what? At the end of the day, a lot of movies, a lot of genres of show have their own built-in preconceived notions. And we can make fun of them. But at the end of the day, they're there for a reason. I remember when I was a kid, the big thing was Fabio on those books. Is he still on those books? I really don't know. Okay, anyway. I'm going to focus it on the love stories that I like best. So, I'm a guy, I'm not really into romance plots, I hated Twilight, so be expecting some that have a little bit of a weird twist. And we're going to start with Dirty Dancing, because nobody puts baby in the corner. So, if you think about it, there's a little bit of creepiness to this story. But let's get into the finer details. I guess spoiler alert, but I'm not putting that up there. The daughter of the person who buys this camp falls in love with one of the instructors of the dance variety. And they have this whole on-again, off-again thing where sometimes she trusts him and sometimes she doesn't. And you have to wonder right up till the end if they're actually right for each other. And she has to learn to let her hair down and be a little less of a nuisance. And he has to learn how to be a stand-up guy and be a little more trusting of individuals. And throughout the whole thing, there is super sexy dancing that I don't know how it kept its rating. I mean, seriously, there's some really, super sexy, dirty dancing in this movie. But I guess that's in the title. It's a reoccurring theme that you're going to see in my choices for today. The idea that two people come from two different worlds, but really have more in common than you'd expect. Because that's why we tell these stories, to remind us that love can come in any form, and that the one that you're really supposed to be with could take you by surprise at any moment. And speaking of surprises, the fact is that point blank, I was surprised as all hell when 50 Shades of Grey were one of the ones I had to talk about. So, the whole thing is an S&M fantasy. The idea that someone who is so wound up tight that they want to give in and lose control. I'm tempted to label it porn, and I even made the joke in a picture a few pictures back. But at the end of the day, it really is a love story. It's kind of a modern-day twisted one, but let's actually dig into what it is we see in this story. When you bring the characters right down to it, is it any different than Dirty Dancing? The uptight girl who's been raised prim and proper, the guy with the dark side and the bad history, but played by the really cute guy, wanting to do something a little dirty, a little perverted, a little not acceptable by society standards. Except, the difference between 2017 standards and 1985 standards are huge. Well, then what's the difference? Well, the difference is a little bit of who's in charge and how much agency the individual characters are given, along with, again, like I said, it's an update on the idea. And you know what? This Valentine's Day, I'm sure movie theaters are going to be packed because there's a sequel coming out. You know where you will not see me and what movie you will not see me reviewing on this channel? It is totally not my cup of tea. But I would be a fool to disregard the fact that it's obviously super popular and that it obviously has made a huge impression. But why do we tell this type of love story? Well, because sometimes we need to remember that being in control isn't always the best thing, and that sometimes letting go and letting the inner darkness out can be reassuring and can be pleasurable. It's still a story about hunting for the one you love and your place in the world. And the characters aren't exactly realistic, but if I started holding that to everyone, well, none of these stories would make it anywhere. But there's another story that has a similar twist, one that we give a little more credence to, one that I like better, and one that I want to talk about for a little bit longer. Specifically, I'm talking about Grease. Another movie with a woman with a little less agency, giving up on being who she is for the man of her dreams. But, I mean, come on, ladies. Who wouldn't give up everything for John Travolta, right? Now I need to use all my willpower not to sing my way through this review. So Grease is the story about a grease gang back in the 1940s and 1950s, and the little good girl who falls in love with one of them. Specifically, Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta played in the movie, and were probably my first real example of a love story that really impacted me. The idea was that, like in 50 Shades, he was a dark member of the society, and she was a goody two-shoes, and she needed to learn to loosen up, and he needed to learn to play it a little straighter. And they kind of gloss over some things, but other things are actually very, very out there. I mean, this is a show that you would show kids, and they talk about things like gangbangs and drug use, and kids in high school that are played by people in their 30s that were doing drugs. And I mean, there's even a bit of a context of rape. Tell me more, tell me more. She put up a fight? Ugh. Yeah, this show gets a lot of critics up in arms about that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, it's actually a pretty innocent story. It's really the story of Sandra Dee coming into and growing up and finding her first love, who, if the story is to be believed, is her one true love. I have issues with us telling people in stories that your high school romance is the one that's going to last forever, because that just ain't true. And there's another dark theory, one that I'm going to share with you, based entirely on the fact that when I read it, I could never unread it. So now I share with you the darkest side of Grease. Now, this is obviously an alternate take. No one who wrote this had this idea in mind. No one that produced this had this in mind. This is very much a fan theory at the end of the day. But it actually makes a lot of sense if you think about it. Except for the fact that, once again, in order to get the person you love, you have to give up being who you are. And that's still a bad ASIP. But not as bad as what happens in my next example. Because in Titanic, we have the fact that she threw that gemstone away. I swear to God, I cry at love stories. I swear to God, people think I'm a girl. Sometimes I like romances that are sappy. But, oh man, is the thing I cry about most. The idea of someone living in squalor and poverty, and their family growing up, and her having grandkids even. And then she threw away the gem! Sorry, sometimes I just go off on that. But okay, Titanic is the story of two people from different clashing levels of society who fall in love and have a tragic ending. Sound familiar? Yeah, it's been told 100 times. The fact that it's told through the tragedy of the Titanic makes me think a couple times of, man, imagine what it's going to be like in a couple years when people are telling about tragedies in my lifetime. But it's a pretty cool love story if you think about it. He drew her naked, he saved her life, she nearly drowned. Oh wait, no, that was Grease, sorry. No singing, though. I promise, no singing. But it's an entire story about what you would give up. And who you fall in love with isn't necessarily who you should fall in love with. Because remember, she was already engaged when she met Jack. But unlike other types of stories, love stories have a very specific type of ebb and flow. Specifically, they're supposed to tug at your heartstrings and make you fall in love with the characters just as much. Do you find that to be the case? Is there a love story you think I should have covered? Is there one of the ones that I covered that you think just sucked so bad I shouldn't have? Wait, no, don't answer that one. I'm sure I'm going to get flamed for that one. But either way, let me know down in the comments. And then like and share this video. And of course subscribe. Because next week we're going to go into the third type of love. Not a sub-story, not necessarily, but the main story still. When you love something that isn't a romantic love. And with that, we're going to have to learn to let it go. But join me next week as we look at that. and we explore all of the heart of the stories we tell. Thanks for watching.